How comfortable are you at work? Are you too comfortable? Are you in the comfortable trap? So, my name's Simon Payne. I'm from the Rebel School. If only at previous points in my career I had, I don't know, a career buddy to help me transition through the different stages of my career, and it's been a choppy ride, then life would have been a lot easier. And I'm here with the career buddy, the co-founder. I am the co-founder of the Rebel School. Mark is the founder of Career Buddy. Mark, welcome. Good to see you.
Simon, thanks so much for this.
I feel
Yeah,
like I'm
so
welcoming
Mark,
you to your own podcast, Mark.
yeah, it's great. And great. I could get used to this. Look, thank you so much for agreeing to do this with us. This is excellent. So yeah, I'm Mark, founder of Career Buddy. Career Buddy is an independent HR consultancy for the employee rather than the employer. So after 10 years of working in corporate jobs, the mixture of HR and corporate sales, enterprise sales experience, I decided to found Career Buddy to help employees get independent, impartial advice on their careers. And we're here to discuss our topic today around people who are feeling comfortable in their jobs, but maybe there is another path for them.
Yeah, for sure. And I think, it's a choppy world out there at the moment, isn't it? And what we're doing at the Rebel School is we're helping people make their own money. And what you're doing is you're helping people to figure out how to navigate those shark-infested waters of employment in the 21st century. So, like, when you talk about the comfort trap, what do you mean by that? I think I know what you mean, but what do you mean by comfort trap?
Yeah, like some would say that they have a very pronounced feeling that they hate their job, right? Or and then they feel compelled to do something about it. But there's a lot of people out there that they're kind of muddling along. They're generally happy, but there's no fire in their belly lighting to go to work on a Monday morning. And unfortunately, for the vast majority of people, that is the case. So people are feeling confident, comfortable, and maybe secure in their employment, but at any stage, that comfort can change. And what we're asking today is, do you have a plan B, and what is that? And maybe you should be taking the onus in your own career to take control of it and do something different.
Yeah, I love that. I think that the thought you triggered was it's a false comfort, isn't it? Because not just because of what's happening in the world at the moment, but it's been happening for decades, is that companies grow, they shrink, they die, and that means it doesn't matter how loyal you are as a member of staff, that your role could be at risk. What's your sense um, of the number of employers that are planning redundancies at the moment? Like, what's the risk for comfortable employees that are just kind of going to work, doing their thing? I'm kind of happy. I don't need to move anywhere, right? I'm going to be here forever.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, I don't think there's anything wrong with feeling committed to your employer. Don't get me wrong in saying that. I think if you want to be all in, then that's okay. But just to be conscious that you may not want to look at and have an alternative for your employment. Um, in terms of the question you asked around job security, I read a report recently that up to a quarter of employers are looking to enforce redundancies over the next number of months, and that kind of backs up previous statistics that I've read that would say that redundancies are at an all-time high in the UK. So loyalty is one thing, and I mean, I think even for myself, I would be, when I'm in employment, I would be loyal to my employer. But you have to be loyal to yourself, I think, first, and that's what the locus of what we're speaking about today.
Yeah, for sure. And part of that loyalty is about inspiration, isn't it? The loyalty to yourself, which is if I can wake up tomorrow morning and feel engaged, inspired, looking forward to what I'm doing, then I'm likely to be living a happier life because we spend a lot of time at work, don't we? And I think it is easy. I mean, I've been in that position of golden handcuffs. I feel like I want to leave. However, it's a bit scary out there. And do I really want to leave when I'm getting, earning the most money I've ever earned? So sort of finding out, if I want to stay somewhere, uh, I know we talked before about personal development. What's your thoughts on, when you're trying to figure out, actually, I did think I want to stay. I can invest in my development, but that could also be useful if I wanted to leave as well. So, how important is personal development in your mind when it comes to your career?
Yeah, look, absolutely. If you can uh, kill two birds with one stone and start to develop in your current career that also makes the transition easier, then absolutely, like take that with both hands. Um, in my time in career, working in HR and now in at founding Career Buddy, I see a lot of people put the onus back on the employer for trying to upskill them, and they're coming to kind of yearly performance reviews, and they're kind of putting the responsibility back on the employer. You are not upskilling me. Like you should be grabbing that by both hands and taking the control back yourself. And at the same time, where you can, upskill and learn more and maybe do a lateral role that adds to your experience, you can also be keeping an eye out to see what else is out there. I'd always say to be entertaining conversations, to explore what the offers are on the market. You don't have to jump, but at least then you can make a conscious decision about staying. Too many people are afraid to even, discuss opportunities outside of their employment. And you mentioned dissatisfaction earlier. In the UK, there's like 90% of people, employees in the UK, are disengaged at work. And that's been the case for a long, long time. And it's just really sad. Like you mentioned about how we spend most of our lives working. And in some cases, you're potentially in like you mentioned earlier about the golden handcuffs, but a lot of people aren't in them situations. A lot of people aren't getting sticking around because the money is great. They're sticking
Just
around
in
because they're
handcuffs.
afraid to do it. Yeah, yeah, just handcuffs. So why? Like, why settle for that? And take the leap to just explore and see what else is out there for you.
What do you think is the opportunity cost of not getting out of your comfort zone and looking around and trying something new, learning new skills and getting yourself ready potentially for a move? What's the downside if you for all of that 90% of the workers that are staying in the same role, just not enjoying work particularly, but just going through the process? What are they missing out on in your mind? What's the opportunity cost of staying comfortable?
Yeah, well, for some people, their jobs may not be that important to them, right? So they may have um, fairly clearly defined what their why is, and their why might not have anything got to do with work. And in them scenarios, they can muddle along, and it's okay to be kind of comfortable um, in some respects, but at the same time, the carpet can still be pulled from a situation like that. Like you're only as comfortable as you are now. It doesn't mean that it's going to last forever. Um, so less so of a risk in that scenario. But a lot of people put a lot of their effort into work, and it is, really part of their identity. And you see then if there is a change, like it doesn't even have to be in a crisis scenario, right? It doesn't have to be redundancy. It could be a change in management, a change in leadership, a buyout. There is multiple scenarios where things can change. And the opportunity is that why waste that time, or why waste or neglect that exploratory work and do it unconsciously. It's um, I find it kind of really problematic to not want to see or not want to kind of protect yourself and put your trust wholly in one employer.
Yeah, very cool. And you reminded me of an expression my old boss used to say a lot, which is front foot, not back foot, right? So what you reminded me of is that like being on the front foot and having much greater influence in my destiny rather than waiting for something that may or may not happen to me at some point. If I'm front foot, then I'm more likely to be ahead of the game.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that reminds me of something when of dealing with anxious situations, and one way to deal with that kind of anxiety is to take action. Right? It's an anxiety building because you feel like you're not doing something, and I think that's the essence of what we're trying to say. And look, I'm not trying to be doom and gloom. Although, like the economic outlook, you hear things about that all the time. The uncertainty, the decade high redundancies, but it, you don't have to ingest all of that. It's not a negative thing to be it's not necessarily the only catalyst. It can be just to explore, and I keep coming back to that because um, you, and to be conscious in that respect. Yeah,
So for someone that's watching this now, thinking, you know what, actually, I have allowed myself to be too comfortable. Maybe I should get myself ready at least to have some options and see what's out there and potentially move or go for a promotion or find a new role or, launch a side hustle, launch a main hustle, etc. What sort of things should an employee be considering now? If you're watching this going, we want to help you because if you're watching this going, well, okay, I'm too comfortable. You're right. You've woken me up. What do I need to do first in order to, get myself on the front foot and prepare for a potential change at some point in the future if I want to?
yeah, it's a great question, and it's something that I would deal with a lot with clients, and is the potentially the ingress point for a lot of my interactions with people. And there's two pillars that I would probably draw on. There's very practical steps. So there's very kind of administrative steps, doing your CV, maybe open to work on LinkedIn, having networking conversations, and they're all pretty straightforward. The harder thing I would say to do is to understand what the real why is. So take a step back, zoom out in your life, and say, what is going to make me happy? And an exercise I do with my clients quite regularly is we will do a list of what makes you happy in life, what gives you fulfillment in life. And a lot of people, when you try to ask them what makes you happy in work, they go, I don't really know. And then scratch their head for, you give them time, but nothing comes. So you ask them what makes you happy in life? What brings you joy? And then if you can, try to match what brings you joy in life into elements of a role. And it has to be really diligent, and you have to give yourself time for it. And it's more difficult, and you might have to ask yourself more difficult questions and live with more difficult answers, depending on the way you're showing up in work today. But what you get from that is hugely powerful. If you do it, diligently and consciously, you'll have a far greater picture of what you want to achieve. And it might be just an element, right? You might get a eureka moment, but you might say, actually, that one task, that maybe it's helping people, is the key thing that I like, from my regular life. Why don't I explore how I can help people in my role? And that's true for me. When I did this, exercise for myself. So yeah, you could, but going back to that, the practical steps, getting your CV ready and reviewed, and there's a service we provide here, which is quite straightforward, and just being kind of open to just to the small steps, small practical steps at the very least.
Fantastic. You reminded me of the miracle question. So the miracle question, if you woke up tomorrow morning as if a miracle had happened and your working life was exactly how you wanted it to be, how would you know? And what would you see, hear, and feel? Like, where are you working? Who are you working with? What kind of, and to your point, the things, the tasks that you enjoy. And then the follow-up question, which is quite interesting, and sometimes this reveals either a deeper sense of connection to the answer, or it reveals some tangents, then stuff comes out that people weren't expecting, is when you ask the follow-up, which is why? For what purpose? Okay, I want my life to be like this. Why? What does that give you if you did that? And then it just helps people get even more clarity, because that's part of this challenge, isn't it? Because knowing yourself, the better we know ourselves, the more likely we are to make an informed choice and not leap for the dopamine hit. I have leapt for a dopamine hit in my career previously, where I went for the shiny object, and turns out it wasn't as shiny as I thought it was going to be, Mark.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. What I continuously go back to, and probably someone else has said this, but I try to remember not to be led by my shadow, and the external or learnt behaviors and ideas about myself that are incorrect. So don't be drawn by things that are in your unknown. And the way that I try to overcome that is to reflect, to understand why I make certain decisions, poor ones sometimes, and to take a step back. And I do that quite regularly, and it goes a little bit off piece in terms of career stuff, but it's really important to understand that why, and reach for the stars. Like, that question's incredible, because we can all dream, right? We can all dream, but some people don't, or a lot of people don't think that can be a reality for them.
Are you an S Club 7 fan, Mark? Because I'm pretty sure Reach for the Stars, I've heard that somewhere before.
Yeah, it's not in my notes. Would you believe? Not in my notes.
I didn't see anything written down anywhere, but the other bit that you made me think, and maybe you are a poet, actually. I love that sentence that you said, not to be led by your shadow. Like, I'm going to write a song about that. That's a brilliant line. To me, that's a chorus line waiting to be slam dunked. Love it. Okay, so when someone else is paying your wages, uh, probably a reasonable time to start preparing for something else. Because if you're in crisis mode, which we're going to talk about in a different conversation, when crisis mode arrives, someone isn't paying your wages, therefore the pressure's on a little bit more for most of us that have got bills to pay and so on. So, what's your sense? So we're getting the CV ready. What other stuff can an employee be doing? What can we be doing to get ourselves ready for a transition, other than there's some admin bits and pieces, getting our CV ready and so on? What, and updating social media profiles, and deleting the posts that we probably shouldn't have sent at 5 to midnight on Friday night, etc. What other practical things can we do to get ready?
Yeah, I probably alluded to it earlier, but it's potentially worth broadening out it. But networking would be a key thing that you can really
Yeah,
do
definitely.
in these scenarios, right?
You said that, I
I
missed it.
found,
That is a key point.
yeah, that's okay. But it's something that I've really tried to. When I was first starting out in my kind of professional life, I was told that it's the most important aspect of your career, and I held that belief, and it's really paid dividends to me. So I do an awful lot personally of reaching out to old contacts, even well before I need them. And there's sometimes a reluctance. People have told me countless times that they feel almost embarrassed to make that connection, right? People that they know and trust and have worked with before, and even friends. At the time of crisis, it's sometimes too overwhelming. So what I would say is keep fostering them relationships. Even just the current ones that you have, and make sure that there's a connection point there, because it makes it so much easier to jump on opportunities when that's the case. That's the kind of key point in that, but also new networking opportunities. And again, it's similar to skills development and upskilling within your current job. You can network within your current employer if there's that you can see a path to that new role that is related to the current role that you're in. I'm not saying that you need to recreate the wheel, and if this particular job is not the one for you, that an adjacent opportunity isn't going to be, it could well be the right fit. So yeah, network, definitely existing contacts, do it early, do it consistently, and try your best to expand that as much as you can.
And you just reminded me of the hidden jobs market, which I don't know what your views on that are, but there was, the best jobs out there, especially the best ones for you, probably aren't ever going to be advertised. You know what I mean? There's that thing
Yeah,
where, there's the job that hasn't even been created yet, and a conversation with someone who trusts you could actually lead to a role being created around your skill set or experience. I've seen that happen countless times. And the success of anything's built on trust. So the people that you've already met, those are the people that are going to introduce you potentially to your next employer, or could even be your next employer, or could be your first client if you're launching your own thing.
yeah, absolutely. And actually, that is something that's happened in my career. So I mentioned at the outset that I started off my career working in HR, and I made a transition to sales. And looking back, it boggles my mind to why I did that. But I'm glad I did it.
That's probably episode 4, Mark, is it? We could probably get that into that.
Yeah, let's come back to that. But the reason I was able to do that was because I was curious about what that role would look like. And I was put in touch with a manager that I just kind of looked for insight into the position, or into their lives, to be a better HR person. And the more I got talking, the more this sounded kind of interesting. And I think it's particularly helpful when you're looking for a transition out of a current role into a role that is much different. So the personal relationship is pretty much everything, because you have no skills in that new role. So they're going to have to take a punt on you that you're able to learn that. And that takes a massive leap of faith, particularly if you don't know someone. But even if you do know someone, you kind of have to trust that they're going to be able to do the job. And I was very lucky and fortunate in my decision that all worked out well. But I will be eternally grateful for that manager at the time, that gave me that opportunity. Now, I was in a very supportive environment, right? So the manager I was currently working under was hugely supportive. I could have made that transition openly. For a lot of people, that isn't the case. So you have to be more tactful about how you're looking for that kind of exposure. But it's still possible, right?
Yeah, for sure. It just reminded me of a friend of mine who found himself unemployed for a number of months, and he was trying to, like, his dream role was something he hadn't done before. He had a lot of relatable skills, and when I spoke with him, he was going through that process of relentlessly going through his connections and people that he'd met over the years, and he did it in a really nice way. He wasn't going out there desperate for a job. We both know that he kind of was, but the reason that he was connecting was he was being curious. Like, what are you working on at the moment? I've got this idea. Can I run it by you? Have you got any advice for me? And there's something about the support that can come from your network. Yeah, of course, we're saying that's where your next role is going to come from, and the more trust there is, then the less of a leap of faith it could potentially be for someone to hire you. but there's other reasons, isn't there? There's that, like, there's idea generation, there's support, there's just frankly human contact, because sometimes it can be a bit lonely when you're trying to figure out what your next move is. So um,
Yeah. No, and when we're thinking about that conversation, I think an important factor is that you have to, you know, the feedback that you get sometimes for them types of conversations, if you're too bullheaded in trying to approach and get something from the individual, you know, if you're looking for a career transition and you're, you know, more forward about it, sometimes the feedback that you can get can be kind of negative, and you kind of have to let that go. I know that in multiple transitions that I've gone through and I've watched other people go through, they've got some terrible advice. They've got terrible advice. They, for whatever reason, you don't know what's going on in other people's head when you're looking for this advice. They've said, no, that's a terrible idea. You definitely shouldn't do that. You definitely shouldn't do that. That's too much. You won't be able to do that. And you have to be careful about the feedback that you receive. But sometimes being more exploratory, softer in the approach can lead you to gain more insight, and the walls can come down a little bit easier. And then you can make the assessment much easier yourself.
yeah, I love that. There's something about being open-minded, isn't there? And curious, that you said curious earlier on. It's that curiosity, asking some good questions and reconnecting with someone, seeing if you can help them. I mean, like we spend all our time looking for someone to give me something. Actually, you go give something.
Yeah, well,
And
that's
just like a
actually one
conversation.
thing that I've noticed with, you know, working with your team is there's always that reciprocal nature to the engagements, right? There's always what can we give back, and you know, it's a sign of a not to blow too much smoke up for you
No, no, I
guys,
like
but
this section. This is good. Please continue.
yeah, yeah, I can see you getting taller in the chair. Um, but it's a sign of a, you know, really positive culture, and that returns. You know, I found that when you, it's like the little acts of kindness, they do come back to you,
Yeah.
and you have to be careful with where you spend your time, maybe because people will, if you're too soft on that, they can take advantage of it. But you know, you'll learn that as you go forward. But I think that's really powerful as well.
I think it was Zig Ziglar said something like, "You can have anything you want in life as long as you help enough other people get what they want." And that's
Yeah,
always stuck
love
with
it.
me. I don't know if I've got the words quite right, but you get the essence of it.
Yeah,
Um,
you're full of zingers.
full of something.